Trace Baker,
I'm here.
Ann Oberson, Janet George,
Here.
Tony Lewis, okay. Oh, great. Okay, I'll wait a second for that because we'll need her for approval of the minutes. Okay. Next up is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Do I have any corrections or anything that needs to happen before we approve those? Nope. All in favor of approving minutes from the previous meeting? Oh wait, I need a motion. Sorry.
This is Trace Baker. I move that we approve the previous meeting's minutes.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Do we have any people for public participation for items not on the agenda? Okay. I guess we'll just jump right into the presentations then. First on the list, American Rescue Plan Act Fund Survey.
Hello everyone, how you guys doing?
Good.
Awesome. Well, my name is Ignacio Barunda. I'm from the Boulder County Commissioner's Office, and I'm going to be doing a presentation about a little bit about the ARPA funds and the community engagement process that we're doing along with that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. A little presentation. Shouldn't be very long. Pull this up here. So, yeah, like I said, I'm from the Boulder County Commissioner's Office, and I'm going to give you a little insight about what we're doing with the ARPA funds and the community engagement process that we're doing. So just to give you a little background, Boulder County, like many other governments, have received $63 million from the American Rescue Plan Act to help respond to community needs and address economic fallout and lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery. And we're here today to hear your ideas as to how Boulder County can help residents, workers, and businesses build assets, strengthen resilience to withstand future impacts. So the way we designed this whole process is we partnered with 5 agencies here in Boulder County. So we worked with Boulder County Arts Alliance, the Community Foundation, Boulder County Human Services Alliance, Front Range Community College, Northwest Chamber Alliance, Peak to Peak, and then Rebuild by Design is a consultant that helped us process this whole engagement process here. And basically, we wanted to get all these organizations together because they work with a lot of parts of the communities that have struggled with COVID-19 these past couple of years. So Front Range Community College, a lot of college students really struggled, taking classes from home with internet access and things like that. Peak to peak, with unincorporated areas or places where the infrastructure isn't as developed as, Longmont or other places like that. Arts Alliance, they really struggled with finding jobs and things like that. So we're trying to gather everyone who was really affected and then kind of getting their insight on how was the best way to not only engage with the community, but also rebuild a better Boulder County. So the goals of this project in, overall is to ensure that the disproportionate effects of COVID on certain communities are mitigated for the future by building asset strength and resilience, provide robust opportunities for community engagement around the distribution of ARPA funds to promote an inclusive government process, to understand residents' experience, to inform long-term planning for Boulder County, and to be as transparent and as inclusive as possible. Sorry, can't really talk today. So these are our goals overall in terms of the the community engagement process. We want 1,500 surveys to be taken overall from across Boulder County. As of right now, we have 700 total surveys collected. That's going to be digital surveys as well as paper surveys. And we had 200 surveys filled out within the first week of putting the Boulder County survey.com website up. And as of right now, we have 22 events confirmed, and we're scheduling more every single day. I think I've scheduled 3 actually between the time this presentation was made and now. So we're at 25 right now, and our goal is 30. And so far, in terms of the themes we've noticed with the surveys we collected so far, number one is that a lot of people really need help with like affordable housing and paying rent and paying their bills. And some other ones that were really big were mental health crisis, childcare, food insecurity, struggle to operate small businesses. Those were some of the bigger things that we've noticed throughout Boulder County and within the surveys. And overall, the goal is just to engage with all the communities around the county, regardless of, so right now, I'm not going to ask you to take the survey right now, but I'm just going to go ahead and let you know that you could go to bouldercountysurvey.com and you can take the survey there. And we want to urge you to share that with people along your network and, your family, friends, colleagues, things like that, and really get the word out because we really want to get as much input as possible from the community to understand what their needs are. We have the survey both in Nepalese and as well as Spanish, which is really great. And we also have a form you can fill out if you want to host a survey, host an event before October 15th. And basically what that is we want you to host a community conversation if you so choose, and kind of gain ideas from the community, your colleagues or things like that. We are also asking if you guys have events planned already, if we can join along and try to engage with the people you have going to those events. And that's basically what we're looking from you guys to get involved with this process. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Again, the website is bouldercountysurvey.com, and we just really want to get the word out so we get as much input as possible. And I'm open to any questions or anything if anyone has any. All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you for the time. Hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you.
Jen? I can't hear you.
Did anyone have any questions? I think
No.
Ignacio is here.
I was just a point of clarification. He asked for input, but I didn't see an opportunity for that. Do we try to provide input right now?
It looks like there was a link on the slides.
Yeah, there was a link on the slides. I can put it in the chat if that's possible. Can write it here.
So you're not asking for our input verbally right now?
I totally can. Any input you have as to better engage the community, I'm really open. I have my notebook right here. I can take notes. Yeah, I can definitely hear some input right now if you'd like.
I had a couple of thoughts if it's appropriate. I think a couple of the big ones are to continue with the education outreach. I mean, since we're at the Parks and Open Space and Trails board, I'm trying to limit my input to those areas, but I think education in terms of getting people out. Parks have proven themselves so popular and so necessary during the time of COVID that I think to help promote people to keep going outside, understand their outdoors, learn how to respect them. And so both, and also for accessibility and direction, signage, education, things like benches and stuff. So elderly and disabled population have places to rest. I think that's one thing I've noticed throughout most of Boulder County open spaces is that there's very few benches. Most of them there are memorial benches, which is great, but it seems like some basic benches would be good. And then the other two I think are very appropriate for this funding source is to continue the sustainability objectives of the agricultural leases. And, outreach, things like outreaching towards market farms who actually provide not just feed stuff for animals, but crops for people to buy for their own homes. And I've heard in the past that there's some desire for processing, some sort of facility for processing those products to get those to the public. And then finally would be in terms of the forestry to continue supporting the prescriptive burns and some of the remediation from the Heil and the Cowwood fires last year. So that's what I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that input. I have it all down here.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. And Trace, Janet, anyone?
Nothing for me. Trace Baker here.
Yeah, Ann Obenchain, I had a couple questions, just more on the timing, Ignacio. So
Yeah, of course.
you've got a few more surveys to gather, and
Yes.
then what is the next steps in the process as far as, how much time will you take for the survey findings, and then when will you be reporting those out, and the recommendations?
Absolutely. So right now our deadline for gathering all the data from the survey is October 15th. And we're kind of in phase 1 right now. So once we gather this data, we have, I think, a week to analyze the data and get our report ready for the Board of Commissioners. And then our hope is to get it to the Board of Commissioners before the budget date. So then they have a little bit of an idea of what we need. And then phase 2 is when we're really going to dig down, like if, for example, if housing was the #1 concern, we're going to work with organizations and people who, use housing services and understand what they need specifically and what's the best way to serve them. Whether it be, like ease of access, just getting funds as easily as possible, just things like that. Phase 2 is really when we dig in deeper. Right now, we're just trying to find like more broad information and kind of dig in deeper in phase 2.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Of course.
Great. Thank you, Ann. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Ignacio.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, the 2021 Strategic Plan Overview, Historic Preservation and Fairgrounds.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe LaFollette, and I manage the Boulder County Fairgrounds. I'm going to play 2 presentations for you tonight. First will be mine, and then following that will be Carol Beams, and she is the Cultural Resources Project Coordinator for Parks and Open Space. So 2 riveting videos coming right up. Give me 1 second. Maybe 2 seconds. You can? Push play. Let me try it again. Hi, my name is Joe LaFollette, and I manage the Boulder County Fairgrounds. Tonight, I'd like to give you a brief overview of our master planning process and our strategic plan. The last master plan that was done for Boulder County Fairgrounds was in 1976, and that's when we moved from Roosevelt to our current location at the corner of Clover and Nelson here in Longmont. Over the years, the nature of business has changed, and the fairgrounds it's evolved to we host many events and a lot more activity here than there used to be back in 1976, obviously. The fairgrounds is a multi-use facility, and we see everything you could possibly think of come here for an event or for showmanship. We see roughly 400,000 visitors. We're putting out approximately. Well, I thought I did. Thank you. Share sound. Let me try that again. Is that any better? Annually. So one thing that we find interesting is we constantly hear, even today, people say, hey, you know, now that the fair's over, you guys have worked seamlessly when we tested it out, you know. I have two. It did. There, it's finally moving. My computer is very slow today too, for some reason. Wound down and your off season is happening right now. So you're kind of looking for things to do. And that's never the case here. We are open year round, and every single weekend and throughout the week, events are happening all the time. So definitely a big change that we've seen is that we it's so strange. Sorry about the difficulty here. Can you see anything now? We don't have a downtime or a slow time at all. We're very, very busy. We have a waiting list for people that want to get to the fairgrounds. So with that, some of the, I want to give you an idea of some of the things that we do currently. So I'm just going to list some of those events for you just to give you an idea of what happens. But one of the main things that we do, or a very important part of what we do here, is support natural disasters and evacuations. We take a lot of pride in that process. During the last fire season that we had with the, Cameron Peaks, Calwood, Troublesome, all those fires, that was the biggest evacuation we've had in Boulder County history. We had 844 animals here, and we're able to manage that very well. Staff worked very hard, but we're here around the clock until that's over with. So we're happy to be able to take care of people and get animals nursed back to health if we can, and make sure that everybody is able to go home when it's all said and done. So handling natural disasters and being an evacuation center is a big, very important part for us. Something that we saw that obviously that we've all been dealing with, continue to deal with, is the pandemic. It's very strange to work at an event center and be closed to the public. Very odd. Seemed like a ghost town kind of, but we were at least able to work with Public Works and Public Health and begin doing testing, and then we started doing vaccinations as well. We were able to do that for most of 2020. We did that. The vaccines finally began to mitigate out where they were, to other locations. So the vaccines were gone, but testing then eventually transitioned. But I think we're going to probably begin testing again, just on a smaller scale. But it was a very interesting time at the fairgrounds to be closed to the public and not see anybody here. However, during that time to be able to support testing and vaccines, critical part for the community, and we were happy to be able to do that. So when we're operating normally and we have events here like we do now, we're back open 100%. So we've already seen many shows come through, and we're, like I said, we're booked throughout the rest of the year and next year. We just finished working on, we're in the process of working on our 2022 bookings, and we don't have any free time really. So art shows, very important thing. They're great to have here, and we're starting to see more and more art shows, which is great. We also have the farm. This is a from our lands to your hands event. That's great. We unfortunately haven't had it for the last 2 years, obviously due to the pandemic, but we're looking forward to seeing this come back. It's a great event. We host many equestrian activities annually. We have 5 arenas that they can use, a main outdoor arena and a main indoor arena. And we have a public arena that's up on Nelson that's open from dawn to dusk for anybody that wants to come use it, and it gets used quite frequently. We also have educational programs here and entertainment activities that come in. We also have dog shows and a train and gym show that are very popular. The dog show is one of our largest events. It's pretty close to fair. It's well attended, and they use our entire fairgrounds. So it's neat when the dog show is here as well. Craft shows are huge here, as well as quilt shows. We have various quilt shows throughout the year. Home and garden shows and fundraising events we have. We have a kids consignment sale. This one is the Just Between Friends event, and it's a large event and well attended. We have this event a few times a year. We also have the Boulder County Fair and Rodeo, obviously, every year. This last year it was a 4-H fair, and the year before that it was a 4-H fair. So we're really looking forward to seeing a normal fair again in 2022, at least we hope to. The farmers market, a good partnership with them. They're here from April through November, and then they do a winter market in December as well in our exhibit building. So it's a great partnership with the Boulder County Farmers Market. And we also do farm to table events. This particular farm to table event was during fair, I think, in 2019. And it's a fun thing to do out in the picnic shelter area. It's a nice environment to have it, and it's well attended as well. So we're definitely a community asset, and we hope to continue to do that. So in the process of this master plan and strategic plan, our first goal number one, is to create and maintain an effective master plan that guides the future of the fairgrounds. To do that, we are working with Design Workshop to create this master plan. Part of that is to look at our existing conditions, look at our ADA, infrastructure and that sort of thing, and find out, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses, and start to list those. We started the master plan in 2020, and mainly in February of 2020. And of course, that's right about the time in March when COVID hit. So right when we got started, we had to hit the brakes and put it on hold, put the pencils down, which was really difficult. We wanted a master plan, and I've been pushing for a master plan for many years. So we felt that the best step would be to just wait until we can have in-person meetings. It's so important to be able to sit down and talk with users and people that come here to really get a good idea of what the needs are, rather than just surveys or online things. So we felt it was necessary to wait until we could meet in person. So I'm happy to say we're back at it. The master plan is full steam ahead. Last week we met with some focus groups, people that already used the fairgrounds, and asked them individually, what do you think is the best thing we could put into the fairgrounds? What are you missing here? What are the strengths? What do you find useful, that's great, that you do like about the fairgrounds? So we're trying to really get a broad picture from each group that come here, from commercial people to nonprofit, educational groups, all of that. So we're really trying to get that dialed in so that we can figure that out. We would love to have the master plan completed and in time for our 2022 budgeting process. So that's our goal, and we're hoping that we can get that done. And I think we can. So we're excited about that. Our goal 2 is to engage and collaborate with the community, stakeholders, and decision makers to provide an ongoing vision and support. And like I said, we're already underway with that. We've met with a lot of stakeholders, including Boulder County departments as well, Public Works and Public Health, emergency folks. Everybody that uses the fairgrounds. If you are involved in the fairgrounds in one way or another, if we haven't spoken to you, we will be. So that's a good thing, and I think that we're well on track with our goal there. So that's exciting to be moving forward with that. And our goal 3 is our easiest goal, I would say. It's basically what we do every day. So we want to maintain and provide a well-kept facilities for users and community while providing exceptional customer service. So while we're planning for future improvements for the fairgrounds, we still have to maintain what we have, and we still have to look into safety issues, and we still have, all the ongoing things that we deal with. So some of the things that we're doing right now, obviously the master plan is going to have a large amount of changes and requests. So we're trying not to get too deep into infrastructure, but some things like safety issues and lighting and things like that we can address, we are currently working on. So we are planning on continuing our phased lighting upgrades in the exterior, like parking lots and things like that, to a more energy efficient lighting and better lighting. And the other thing would be, I think we're working on different concrete projects like broken sidewalks that have shifted, that could be a trip hazard and things like that. As you can imagine, these sidewalks are 40 years old, so we need to fix them up and improve those areas that are failing. So we're going to continue to do that, continue to provide a clean and safe Fairgrounds. We take a lot of pride in customer service, and we take a lot of pride in professionalism. And if it's an outdated building, fine, but it's going to be a clean and well-kept one. So that's our plan, and we're going to continue to do that and work on this master plan. And we're just excited to have a bright future for the Fairgrounds, and very happy to be working on that now. So I'd love to take any questions you might have at this time, and I appreciate you listening.
Good evening, POSAC members. My name is Carol Beam, and I'm the Cultural Resource Project Coordinator. Tonight, I would like to present the Cultural and Paleontological Work Group's Strategic Plan and 2021 objectives. First, I'd like to share with you who the work group is and its responsibilities. The Cultural and Paleontological Resources Work Group is staffed with one full-time employee. This is the department's only resource-based work group with only one full-time employee. All the other departments' resource-based work groups have multiple FTEs as well as seasonals. The Cultural and Paleontological Work Group completes its own projects as well as supports other work group projects and partners with community planning and permitting on cultural and paleontological issues around the county. The Cultural and Paleontological Work Group's desired future condition. Cultural and paleontological resources are managed in a timely, appropriate, and professional manner. Through these actions, the stories of ancient life and historic peoples are weaved together that are respectful of the fossil record and inclusive of the legacy of people traditionally associated with the land. The Cultural and Paleo Work Group has 4 main goals to create a solid foundation. Condensing the 4 goal statements into themes, protect, evolve, manage, and engage provides for a simple way to understand each of the goals. Next, I will go into a little bit more detail about each goal. Goal 1, protect. Identify and record cultural and paleontological resources. This goal is a critical element of the Cultural and Paleontological Resources Plan because in order to determine the significance and management of the resources, we first have to identify and assess the significance of these resources. Objective 1.1. Apply for a certified local government grant to fund a Class 3 archaeology survey for the Billings and/or Riverside Ranch open space properties. Objective 1.2. Complete the Billings Open Space Cultural Resource Survey fieldwork. Objective 1.3. Complete the Heil Valley Ranch Cultural Resource Select Resurvey fieldwork. Objective 1.4. Complete a paleontological survey on the Southeast Grasslands open space properties. All 4 of those objectives support Goal 1 in terms of identifying and recording cultural and paleontological resources on open space. Goal 2, evolve. Develop action plan to maximize the use of existing data, increase data collection, and incorporate the use of new technologies. This goal is another critical element in the work group's strategic plan foundation and addresses the need to move away from paper-based operations into a digital operation, increase data collection in order to effectively manage resources, and utilize new technology to be a leader in managing cultural and paleontological resources. Unfortunately, the objectives for this goal were delayed until 2022 and beyond due to the work group's limited staff time and an unexpected POS Foundation grant in early 2021 that caused the staff to pivot and focus on the POS Foundation projects after Goal 2's objectives were defined in 2020. It is important to note that the POS Foundation projects support the work group's DFC and goals and were added to the work group's 2021 objectives and discussed in this presentation. Goal 3, manage. Manage cultural and paleontological resources based upon their significance, condition, and use. This goal is a cornerstone where the work group allocates a large amount of its time. With so many cultural and paleontological resources to manage, this goal requires continued perseverance, year in and year out. In 2021, the work group's objectives include Objective 3.1, annually complete agricultural lease review in partnership with the agricultural lease staff to determine what leases will need stewardship guidance. Objective 3.2, annually coordinate with other work groups on their projects that may impact cultural and paleontological resources and determine their project needs. Objective 3.3, write one landmark nomination and bring to the Historic Preservation Advisory Board for a recommendation of approval to the Board of County Commissioners. Objective 3.4, complete the Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm National Register nomination. And finally, Objective 3.5, complete the Brawley, historically known as Wenzel, Barn Silo Fireman's Hat reconstruction project. Goal 4, engage. Increase public awareness and stewardship actions by sharing the value cultural and paleontological resources provide and the benefits of historic preservation. This is the public outreach goal. The goal is meant to address the desire to engage with the public to raise awareness of the cultural and paleontological resources on open space and facilitate increased stewardship of those resources. Objective 4.1, annually host one public awareness event, either in person or virtually, that will bring attention to the cultural and paleontological resources and historic preservation projects. Objective 4.2, annually write one Images article highlighting cultural or paleontological resources or historic preservation project. This concludes my presentation for the Cultural and Paleo Work Group. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Do we have Carol here and we have Joe here. Do we have any questions for Joe or Carol?
Trace Baker here. I have two questions for Carol. First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation. In your culture objective 1-1, you talk about completing a class 3 survey. What defines a class 3 survey and why are you using that level?
Hi, this is Carol Beam, Cultural Resource, Parks and Open Space. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Can you see me?
Oh, yes.
Oh, great. I can't see myself. I'm having a little bit of computer problem, of course, like everybody else, but I'm happy to answer your question. So a class 3 archaeology survey is just a term that we use within the field to define a survey that covers 100% of a particular project area. So we, for example, like the Heil Valley Ranch, a class 3 survey would mean that we would walk transects for the whole entire property and cover it 100% in terms of the field work. There are other surveys that are less than 100% and they're like class 2, which would survey select areas. And a class 1 is more like a literature professional search and doesn't have any field work. So these are state defined terms for each of the different levels of intensity for survey. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you. Second question, the properties you picked are Billings and or Riverside Ranch. Why pick those properties?
Great question. Thank you. Because those two properties are slated for future forestry thinning projects. And we've never looked for cultural resources. So the forestry work group's project to do some like wildfire mitigation, forest thinning projects have the potential to negatively affect cultural resources. So just like other resource work groups being wildlife or plant ecology, cultural and paleontological resources needs to assess other work groups' projects to make sure they don't negatively affect the resources that we're responsible for. So since we've never looked at neither one of those properties previously, we need to complete those surveys in advance of the forestry projects to make sure that when the forestry projects do happen, we can tell them what to avoid, where they can park, what things they can do, what things they need to avoid.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Jan. I have a question for Carol. Carol, those are a great presentation and great work that you do. Do you do this all with volunteers in your one FTE, or do you contract too?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you asked that. I have no volunteers. I have no seasonals. I'm a army of one, as I like to say. And so I'm a very busy person, but I'm very lucky and I love my job, and I know I make a difference. It is a daunting task with a staff of one, because I service just as much acreage as everybody else does in the department. It's not any different. So to put it, we're all on the same level playing field in terms of anything that's under open space is all our territory. And in order to accomplish that, heavy lift, like all of us, I do have to rely on contractors, and therefore needing funding to hire contractors. So the department since the 1990s has been very successful in terms of leveraging a little bit of seed money, cash money from the county in order to receive, a lot of state money. And I think after we're up like at $1.3 million so far. So we've been very successful to leverage our money, and I spent a lot of time writing grants, let's put it that way. I write the grants, I run the grants, I do all the financials, and I also participate as much as I can in the project. So it is a to Z for me, for everything.
Good job, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Joe, I have a question about the events at the fairgrounds. Have you had any issues with implementing like COVID security or protocols? Are people adapting to that pretty well?
Well, they're adapting to it a lot better than I thought they would. I thought I was going to have a lot more issue with it than I did, but actually people are adapting to it very well. We basically put the signs up, and so far we just haven't had any issues, just a random here and there, but people are adapting very well.
That's great. So you feel like you're going to be able to maintain the schedule that you have going forward without any real issues?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've already had many very large events that went off really well. And one of the events, the mask mandate for indoors came out in the middle of the event. So we just went down there and said, well, from this point on, we need to wear masks when we're inside, and didn't have an issue. Everybody did their part. So it was great.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Joe or Carol?
I have one, and it's more of a comment on Carol Beam's work, and maybe I missed it, Carol. But in addition to what she listed there, I know she also looks at some of the historic conservation easements on other properties, and Longmont has one. And I worked with Carol back when I was working for the city of Longmont at Sandstone Ranch. So she also does that kind of work, making sure that those conservation easements are upheld the way they should be. So yet another thing on her plate. So, applaud you for all your efforts there, Carol.
Oh, thank you, Paula. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Joe and Carol, for the great presentation. We really appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is the Calwood Fire Recovery at Heil Valley Ranch.
Good evening, POSAC. David Hurt, Senior Plant Ecologist, Parks and Open Space. Let me start my video here, or my PowerPoint. Can you all see that? David Hurt, Senior Plant Ecologist, Parks and Open Space. Myself and Charlotte Benjamin, Engineer and Project Manager with Parks and Open Space. I want to present the Calwood Fire Recovery Update for you tonight. I just realized we're about 3 weeks shy of the year anniversary of this fire, and a lot's happened on the ground, and we still have a lot to accomplish. So we'll speak to both of those things. And I realize many of you were out there early in the summer. You got to do a field trip to the site, so you saw firsthand the effects of the fire and some of our aerial mulching efforts. I can't recall if you actually saw the helicopters dropping mulch or just moving trees or something like that, but so you're pretty familiar with it. Since day one, we've been working with a lot of different stakeholders and organizations. Our two primary funders for this work have been the Natural Resources Conservation Service and their Emergency Watershed Protection Program. They paid for the bulk of the aerial mulching and a lot of the structure work we're doing in the emergency warning system. We also got funding from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. They helped fund some mulching on high priority U.S. Forest Service lands, as federal land is ineligible for the NRCS money. We've also worked with multiple Boulder County departments, U.S. Forest Service, City of Longmont, lots of different water districts and nonprofit watershed education centers, fire protection districts, and other state, local, and federal agencies. Some of you may have seen this map before, basically the perimeter of the fire as well as the burn severity. A lot of our work is focused on these red and yellow areas, the high and moderate burn severity within the fire. About 34% of this fire had the high and moderate burn severity. And about 47% of this fire was on parks and open space lands, with another 14% on private property that has county conservation easements on it. So we have the lion's share of the acreage on that Calwood fire, and hence we took the lead role in a lot of this work. So obviously these high severity areas were moonscapes following the fire, hardly a live tree in sight, no vegetation, all the understory vegetation, all the duff and litter consumed, and hydrophobic soils where water can't infiltrate. And that all leads to increased runoff and peak stream flows, and which leads to threats of flooding, debris flows, hill slope erosion, and sediment transport into the streams. So one of the first things we did, probably late March, early April, was some seeding of some high priority areas. We didn't do much seeding on the fire at all, and research has shown that it is not the most effective treatment, especially in the critical first and second year after a fire, whereas mulch is a pretty immediate benefit of getting that down on the ground. But we did have some interest in doing some seeding in these couple of these slopes, or this one slope directly above our main trailhead at Heil Valley Ranch. You can see it in the lower left there. These drainages, the middle one particularly, was rated as the most acceptable high probability for debris flow in the USGS survey work in the entire watershed, and along with one other one. And the other two drainages there were not far behind. So we seeded two of these, the one on the left on the south and the center one. The one on the north was within the Golden Eagle nest buffer zone, so we couldn't get into that one to do the work. We used a mix of some native grass species and a sterile cover crop, and had volunteers. There were some of the first volunteers out in the park up on the fire to do the work. And I was up there in June, and I wasn't too hopeful because there's just a few sprigs of stuff here and there. But I came back in August and was pleasantly surprised to see some really good germination and establishment. The stuff up there looks like it's been growing for 2 or 3 years, thanks to all the moisture we had this spring and summer. So I feel a lot better about those slopes above the trailhead, seeing that in place. For our mulching work, we needed to procure materials to process the wood and produce the mulch. A lot of that came from hazard trees along our roads and trails. So we've cleared about 8 miles of access roads and trails between Heil Valley Ranch and the Calwood Education Center. Trees that were dead, 60 feet on either side of a road or trail. The lower right there, I mean, that looks like a huge clear cut. It is a large area because it's an area of the Wild Turkey Trail where the trail switchbacks. So in effect, you have two trails stacked on top of each other and about 240 feet of clearing in that area. All that material was flown to one of 4 landings, and then it was processed with a horizontal grinder into the wood shreds. Those are flown back up onto the hillsides as mulch. You may have not seen that in action. That's kind of the real show for the tours. And then on the ground, you can see what the coverage looks like. These are 4 different units, and the pilots are pretty adept at getting this stuff spread really well. It doesn't spread quite as evenly as agricultural straw would due to the differences in the size and the weights of the particular shreds. But they do a great job of getting this spread on the ground to a pretty consistent degree. Early on, it's easy for them to see the mulch on these black hill slopes. As the season progressed and things greened up with all our rain, it got a little trickier for them to kind of spot where they had dropped mulch and where they hadn't. And then in some areas, things greened up so well that we actually removed some of the areas we thought we would mulch. We removed areas entirely because the established vegetation that came back, there was no need to mulch over the top of that. So our contract for this aerial mulching required a 70% cover on average for each of the units. We had about 35 units in total. And to look at that, we would place down these grids, and we'd look at not the squares, but the little tiny dots you see there on the intersection of the lines. And each one of those that intersected a piece of mulch or vegetation or a rock larger than 1.5 inches counted as cover. We had random points in each unit, like 4 to 10 within the unit. And then we'd rock a transect of 10 of these plots within each transect. So we did 1,720 of these plots and a whole lot of points counted. And I got to thank my seasonal staff for doing the bulk of that work. They were up there almost daily, keeping up with the helicopters. I don't know the mileage they hiked, but I'm sure it was a lot of miles on a lot of steep, rugged terrain, and some hot and no shade, as you can see in those landscapes. So they were invaluable. If we had areas that were missed, we talked to the pilots. We'd either mark up hard copy maps, or we'd drop pins in Avenza maps and GIS, or we could lay out kind of targets like this. They really liked that. They're really visible for them to see from the air, and they could drop into those areas. The only downside of that, after I did it a few times, I realized once I put them out, I had to go back out and hike all the way back out there to collect them again. So that was kind of a pain. In all, we did about 2,115 acres of the fire. And you can see that here, the green is the NRCS funded units that are on county land and private lands. Cowwood Education Center, you can see on the left there, 1 and 2. And then the blue polygons are the U.S. Forest Service areas funded by the CWCB money. We did have a lot of rain. It was a wet spring and early summer. Steve Jones, who's the kind of a weather guru in Boulder, told me that this was only the 3rd time since 1897 that Boulder's reached 20 inches of rain by the 4th of July. So what we thought was wet was indeed wet. We had, I think, over 40 days of precipitation during the project. A lot of those were just, light precipitation, but we had 8 days over 1/2 inch and 5 days over 1 inch of rain. And a lot of times that fell really quickly, high intensity rains. We have this gauge adjusted rainfall radar on site that allows us to really look in real time and back in history to the precipitation within the burn area and even on the individual mulching units. Excuse me, and you can see here an example from July 31st of 1 inch into 1.4 inches, and most of that in a really short time, probably 1 inch, 1.2 inches in just an hour or two. And that did have the effect. This mulch does its job, but some of these high intensity storms would displace that mulch. Some areas got repeated high intensity storms, and we did see that mulch move down slope. We saw very little of it go into the streams. So I think it just kind of rearranges itself on the slopes and built little debris dams in itself. So like I said, altogether, 2,115 acres. This is the largest wood aerial mulching operation in state history to date. There's been larger ones using straw. And I think that fact might not last much longer, because I believe they're doing potentially more than that up at the Cameron Peak fire currently, and maybe on the East Troublesome as well. But we were able to mulch 45% of those high and moderate burned acres. And if we look at just if we exclude the Forest Service, which we didn't do much there because of the funding, we were able to mulch 85% of those areas on parks and private land, which is a huge ratio. I mean, you couldn't do that on these larger fires. We dropped almost 11,000 tons of mulch, and took approximately 14 weeks and 4 days and 647 hours of helicopter flight time. And amazingly enough, I had very few complaints from the public about the helicopter noise. Total cost for both the funding and both projects was just over $4 million. And that equates to about $1,925 an acre. And that was actually less than what was paid out on the Waldo fire, a unit price, and the High Park fire back in 2012. So we got a pretty competitive price from the contractor for this project. We were able to treat almost an additional 170 acres and still stay 1.3 million under our original estimated budget. So with the NRCS funding, they allow us to move that savings to some of the other tasks in the recovery process. So we'll be able to move that money over to the structures work and do a much more comprehensive job on these structures. And Charlotte is going to speak to that next.
Okay, I only have a few minutes. First of all, I want to make sure that people can hear me. Excellent. Okay, I'm Charla Benjamin with Parks and Open Space. I'm an engineer with Rec and Facilities. And as David mentioned, I'm the project manager. So I only have a few minutes to give you kind of a teaser of what we're doing out there. And I do hope that you'll decide to come out and see the work on the ground after we're done. We have a lot of structures installed, but a lot more to go. And it's not only what we have the contractor working on, but it's also what the grounds department is doing for Parks and Open Space. We're really teaming up very closely to make sure that we're protecting the access roads and minimizing the amount of sediment that's going to be transported down into the streams and create problems for all of our stakeholders. So there are so many people working together on our projects that I can't name them all. And we've been really lucky this summer with just short duration, high intensity events. So we have seen the mulch move, but we have not seen really big debris flows. We have seen big enough debris flows to have like the sound of a freight train coming down the mountain that the residents in the property can hear, and that scares them quite a bit and brings down 4-foot flood waves and debris flows, sometimes 3 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot. So this stuff is moving, and we know with high intensity, longer duration events, we'll see a lot more moving. So I'm going to very briefly show you some of the plan set and just talk about the structures. So the plan set has, if you could back up just a minute, please. Plan set has sheet 3, sheet 4, and sheet 5 that I'm going to give a little bit of an overview on and tell you what we've done so far. Next slide. Thank you. So we have nearly completed all the structural work in the Gear Meadows area, which is the furthest west, and that big blob to the west that was in the previous slide. And we have installed about 30 structures. And as you get, there's a bunch of notes all over this plan, and it's really, really messy. We have tons of structures going in and tons of changes. Every Monday, we have people out there reviewing the work, looking ahead. Between the design work that was done and when the structures are going in, things have changed quite a bit. We have seen erosion on these streams, cutting in about 3 feet in some locations. So we've put in beaver dam analog structures, filter dams. We've felled some trees in some area to try to hold back the debris flows, and that is actually working very well. I've installed some spreader bars downstream of the culverts that the grounds crew have been installing. They've been regrading the road and installing a bunch more culverts so that we can handle the post-fire flooding that we're getting, which is quite a lot more water than we've seen because of the fire characteristics on the landscape, changing hydrology. Next one. And this is basically the main trailhead and a little bit areas west and south. And the main trailhead is our main potential threat to both life safety, property, and we want to protect that. And then also just to the west, we have the main sanctuary that didn't burn, where we have bats and owls that we need to work with. And then we also have a floodplain permit that we'll need to do if we want to do any work in that yellow area, which is the floodplain. But we have a lot of survey and planning that's going on in this area. And we also, in this area, we have the low water crossings in the main parking lot and the bridges and some big culverts we want to replace. Next slide. We're also have some eagle buffer, that big line through the middle. So we have to get in within the eagle buffer areas, potential eagle buffer if the eagles come back, and do our work now before December 15th. So we're going to be hopping around the whole property, trying to make sure we get the right work done at the right time. But we have a lot of changes. We've been walking through these structures, trying to make sure that they're the right structure in the right place. So we have a bunch of notes that were, and this is upcoming work. Next slide. So this is a picture of a felled tree structure, or a series of them. Basically, there's about 5 to 7 trees per kind of structural area, and they get really linked in with chain cables, cables and other things that will anchor them in place so that they'll build up the sediment behind them, but not come crashing down the hill slope. So they're intentional tree felling. Next slide. And we actually did, the contractor was able to work together with other stakeholders to harvest materials. So they went up to the Mountain Ridge subdivision and cut down some of the trees there to help out the property owners and use those materials for our structures. Next slide. And those posts went into our beaver dam analog structures. There's other terms for this, but basically we put a bunch of posts 3 foot in the ground and weave some material between them, basically basket weaving to capture the debris flows. So later on the landscape, they're made out of wood, they'll disintegrate in place and yet maybe even create some more wetland-like areas. Next slide. And here's another picture of another one on the landscape, higher up, closer to the Forest Service property. So debris, we're kind of in the areas where we expect alluvial fans in this particular part of the landscape. Next slide. And we have some filter dam construction going on. So these are kind of, they get cut down into the stream channel and they're designed just about 2 foot high to build up sediment behind them, but also create spaces where we can do maintenance. Next slide. And this is a filter dam that's installed in place, and basically just reviewing it, making sure that it's doing the job we want it to do. And we haven't had any really big rain events since these have been installed. So most of the debris is being caught by the felled tree area. Next slide. And then we have some areas where the stream is going down, cutting down in about 3 foot in the channel. So we wanted to stop that head cut moving up and really causing some gully erosion. So this kind of drops the energy out as the flow moves down a riprap channel, and it'll actually have soil and vegetation hiding it. Next slide. And then there's all these are working in series on the landscape. So this is looking back southeast, and there's a series of structures. It's a little hard to tell in the picture, but better if you come out in person and see these areas. Next slide. Public safety measures. Next slide. Just wanted to briefly talk about that we have high turbidity events. We have the VFlow advanced warning system like David talked about, and they are helping our stakeholders plan, get a little bit of advance warning for when we're getting these flows coming out of the burn area. Next slide. And we did on May 30th have a big sediment collection event. So we had, this is our 4-foot flood wave that really moved a lot of material down the landscape. We can see the debris flow scars high up on the mountains. And so we know this material is moving down. We've had ash, we've had a lot of sand, we've had cobbles from 6 inches to 10 inches, and we hope that all these structures will catch the big boulders and the big trees and catch them higher on the landscape rather than bringing them down to the access road near the caretaker's cottage. So in the future, hopefully we won't see this here. We'll see the sediment collecting in places higher up. Next slide. And a lot of people have been doing a lot of work trying to make sure that when we have staff, we have contractors, volunteers, and future public coming to this site, we know, at least now, we know who's there, so we can go rescue them if we have a big event occurring. And again, debris flows can occur without very much warning. It can be a very small rain event, causes a big problem. But there's a trail that now leads people up high and dry. They don't have to enter the flood zone, basically enter those locations near the streams. They have alternate ways to escape to a place where people can be rescued. Next slide. And now we have Heil Valley Ranch recovery. Next slide. We had a big all staff day. So we had people out there, volunteers basically, but in this case, it was staff doing some projects on the ground. So we had mulch application, we had seed collection, but we are funding a lot of things, as you know, from previous presentations, as far as projects that need to happen out there, whether it's gate rebuilding, benches that need to be put back that were burned, the bridges and culverts that got burned out. We have trails that need work, forestry disease and insect control, weed control, wildlife habitat restoration, tools that we need to buy for all this. A lot of small stabilizing structures that could be identified and placed on the landscape with volunteer groups. We have the access roads, maintenance and restoration if we have big debris flows, the cultural resources survey that Carol mentioned, and a lot of signage and trailhead and parking restoration. So work to be done for sure. Next slide. And this is an example of the grading of the access road. This is a loop road that, so people that live on this property, the caretaker and the Oaks, they can escape one way or another, depending on which portions of the road have blown out based on where the high intensity rainfall has been. So our grounds crew has been up there since the beginning of August, doing a lot of work on the roads and making sure that they're a little bit safer, and our contractors working hand in hand with them, make sure everything ties together really well. Next slide. And back to David. And any questions?
Hi, any questions from POSAC?
This is Paula. I just want to congratulate both David and Charlotte. This is amazing work, and I can only imagine how devastating these debris flows would have been without the mulching and without the structural work you've done. I'm wondering if CDOT has asked for some of your advice on I-70. I mean, that's a huge problem there, but I mean, this is sort of kind of a whole new area of expertise. And I just am very grateful that you guys are working so hard in our county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This might be a question for Therese in the director's report, but I will ask you guys a couple of status questions about opening. There's been a lot of urgency with the public, specifically opening Schoolhouse and Overland Trail. There's been, questions that have come to me about when will those be open, or can they be open during the times when mitigation efforts aren't happening? What is the status of openings? There's been a lot of questions about those things from the public. And I don't know if that's you guys or Therese.
I might let Therese answer that, just to.
Sure, I'm trying to turn my video on. Hi, Therese Glowacki, Parks and Open Space Director. So yes, we know that there are a lot of questions out there, and I was going to give it an update then, but this is an appropriate time to tell you that we have worked really hard to get as many of the trails on the north side of the property open, and we have 13 miles of trail open at Heil Valley Ranch right now, which is really remarkable. You saw David's picture with the felled trees along the hazard trees that were felled around the Wild Turkey Trail. So all of that went into our planning to say, hey, can we let people come in from the north, even come into some of the burned area and get a real view of the devastation that this fire caused. As you saw with Charla and all of the safety messages that she was showing and the big graders up there, with the work that they're doing with the structures, it's primarily based out of it is completely based out of the southern end of the property. So they're using the trailheads at the south. They're using the main trailhead. They have big pieces of equipment coming and going, and everyone out there has safety hats and safety vests and everything. So for us to even consider bringing the public in with that kind of activity out there, it would just be too big of a safety issue. So we took that information to the county commissioners a couple of weeks ago, and we requested that we keep the southern part of Heil Valley Ranch, which really is about 6 miles of trail, including the Overland Loop, and keep that closed until we really have all this structure work done. The other thing is what Charla showed you is as much as we have gotten done now, but there's still a whole nother section of work to be done where she had mentioned the work in the floodplain. Well, all along the access road. So if you're driving between the Corral trailhead and the main trailhead, that's the Gear access road. That's where a lot of the work that's going to be done by Charla and the contractors between now and March is going to happen. So with all of that, we have requested and been approved by the county commissioners to keep the southern end closed until spring of 2024.
Great, thank you.
2022.
2022, thank you. In the future.
Thank you for that correction, David. Any other questions from POSAC? No? Okay, well, thank you for all of your hard work. The slides were amazing, and the work you guys are doing up there is amazing. We did get to go up there, but we didn't get to see the helicopter because it was downed the day we went up. So a little sad about not getting to see the helicopter, but I got to see some of the work you were doing, and it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Therese, you're back on with director's update.
I am, and since you already heard about Heil, I won't tell you any more about that, but thank you to Charlotte and David. They really have been working so hard. And as Charla mentioned yesterday, we had our first all-staff work day since the pandemic. So it was a wonderful event. We had over 80 staff go out to Heil and do work to help get that property stabilized and the signs rebuilt and the fences up and, you know, forestry work done and the seed collection. So yesterday, some of her photos were from yesterday's event. It was a wonderful event, and we are just, you know, the staff just loved getting to see the fire. We are going to have more public events through the course of this fall that people can sign up for if you want to volunteer. And then we also are hoping to host a couple of just public information, come in and have a sneak preview of the burn area. So watch for those advertised as well. I want to be sure that you all have on your calendars some of the important POSAC meetings coming up, because there are some very important ones, and it's not just on the fourth Thursday. So on October 19th, there's going to be the joint Boulder County, Lafayette, and Louisville management plan presentation by our Masters of the Environment graduate students out of CU. They've been working with our staff for 8 or 9 months now, helping draft a management plan for the Mayhofer Farm, which, as you know, is a key part in the central, it's a key open space in the central part of Boulder County, sandwiched between Louisville and Lafayette. There's agriculture on it. They're proposing trails, historic. There's some historic, well, certainly there's a historic farm in the middle of it, which we didn't purchase. But that's for October 19th. We encourage you to join that one. Oh, excuse me. That's October 21st. We'll get these numbers right. On October 19th is the joint Boulder County Commissioners and POSAC public hearing on the cropland policy. So every year in our cropland policy, we are required to give a public presentation to the county commissioners. And this year, since it's a new group of commissioners, they would like to talk more in depth about our transition away from genetically engineered crops. And so we wanted POSAC to be involved with that as well. So you're invited. We hope you can join. So on October 19th, it will just be a staff presentation and a public hearing. There will be no POSAC deliberations. So that's come and hear what staff is presenting and hear the public's input. And then at your October 28th POSAC meeting, that is going to be where you as a staff, there'll be no more public testimony, but you as a staff can discuss what you heard and make a recommendation to the county commissioners on the update to the cropland policy. So those are two very important meetings. And I would say October 19th, prepare for a long one. In the past, they have been very long. This one starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The Tolan Trail is a trail that I'm sure you have heard about it at other POSAC meetings. It is basically a single track trail that is on the Tolan property that Boulder County has a conservation easement on. It's primarily in Gilpin County, and it connects the West Magnolia Trail system to the Rollins Pass Trail area. Our section of trail is 7 miles. We started work clearing the trail with forestry work and then last summer, and then we hired a contractor for this summer. They've built 1.75 miles of that trail, and they are closing. They're going to be wrapping up this summer's work on October 15th, because that's when Eldora, the ski area, starts making snow. So again, just a little background on that trail. It will only be open to the public in the summer. It will not be open in the winter. And it does cross through some of Eldora Mountain Ski Resort's Nordic trails, which is why in our agreement, we have separated it out. Summer will be the toll trail access, and in the winter, the trail will be closed. So we anticipate completing it next year. And the hope is that if we get it completed, that we may be able to open that trail at the end of 2022. If not, it'll be spring of 2023. If you live up in the Lyons area, as Ann does, you may have noticed, or you may know, that Highway 7 has started their final big flood recovery project. Oh, Janet, you're up in that area too. So the big, there's a large CDOT project starting just west of Lyons, and it goes quite far up Highway 7 there. They are using a small section of Heil as their staging area, so we've been actively involved in that. They have flaggers up to make anytime the road is closed, make that safe. Well, a second project in that area is happening on our Parks and Open Space property, the Hall 2 property, which is the former andesite quarry. So that the company that operated the quarry last is Aggregate Industries, and they are responsible for the reclamation. So the reclamation just started a couple of weeks ago on our Hall 2 property. Now, Hall 2 is closed to the public, so we don't have to close any trails or anything. But there are large pieces of equipment. There's a lot of earth moving, and in the near future, they're going to start blasting, because in order to meet the state standards, it's the State Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety, DRMS. They require certain conditions, so you have to reclaim the site so it doesn't pose a safety issue. And so part of that is taking off the top of the mountain and using it to fill some of the side slopes. We've been working on this for probably, I would say, 7 or 8 years with Aggregate Industry, working on the reclamation, and it is finally beginning. It is also going to lay the groundwork for us to do stream restoration on Hall 2, which is really exciting. So for people up in Lyons, it's CDOT stuff and the quarry, and it could get very confusing. So Parks and Open Space, our communication staff has been working with the town of Lyons to assure that we have information on our public website, because with that kind of activity up there, we know we're going to get calls from the public on what's going on Hall 2 and what's happening on Hall Ranch with CDOT. So that's just, there's a website out there for you to gather more information if you'd like. With our culturally responsiveness and inclusion strategic plan, we've already started implementing some of that, including we've already designed, created, manufactured, and installed bilingual signs at many of our kiosks. So that's wonderful. If you're out at certainly at Caribou Ranch or Mud Lake, you will see those bilingual signs out there now. And then one of our most recent hires, our senior volunteer coordinator. It was a position held by Larry Colbinson for 24 years. He coordinates our 120 volunteer naturalist program. When he retired, we made that position bilingual. And so the person we hired, his name is Carlos Lerma, and he will be starting in that position next week, October 1st. So we're very excited to be implementing some of our CRISP work. You all know that Al Hardy, our Rec and Facilities longtime division manager, left early in the summer. His position just closed. The advertisement for that position just closed on Tuesday, and we expect to do interviews for that in mid-October. And my understanding is there were 40 applications that came in for that. So that's good news. We'll have a good pool to draw from. You heard Joe talk about the Fairgrounds, just in collaboration with Department of Public Health. We are reopening a portion of the Fairgrounds. Just the parking lot along Nelson Road is going to reopen for a COVID testing, drive-through COVID testing site. And you guys most recently got to go up and see the Sherwood Forestry Project that Stefan took many of you on a field trip. That is currently out to bid, and we anticipate work starting up there in November or December of this year. So those are the major updates with parks. Do you have any questions?
Teresa, I have a quick question about Heil still. How many volunteer projects have you guys done, and will more be happening this fall and winter, and how would people find out about those?
So I see David is still on here, and I know that he might have a better idea of the actual numbers than I do. David, do you know?
I don't know how many we've done so far. There's been a couple trail projects. I know Andy Tyler and his staff has led, reopening the part of the Wapiti Trail and doing some other work. We have 3 upcoming seeding projects in October 2nd, 9th, and 16th. Those are all Saturdays. I think they're already filled and maybe have a wait list already as well. And that's going to be seeding some of the staging areas from the helicopter operations. And then beyond that, I do not know that we have more beyond October.
Great, thank you. Trace, I see you want a question, and Ann, maybe?
Yeah, Trace Baker here. I noticed there was a posting for a new park ranger, and is that a new position, an addition, or is it a replacement?
It's a replacement. Jason Vroman was one of our senior park rangers. So we have a park ranger supervisor, that's Bevan Carruthers, who you've seen. And then Jason Vroman and Aaron Hartnett are the 2 senior rangers. Jason took a job. No, Jason actually didn't take a job. He and his family moved back to Wisconsin. So that's the position that's open, and I believe it closes this Friday or Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Yeah, Therese, just curious on the, thanks for the updates on Lions. We're sad that 7 is closed for the next bit, but we'll come up with other bike rides. But curious if you had any estimates on when the blasting was going to start at the aggregate quarry.
It's supposed to start at the end of October. And my understanding is it's not going to be blasting, every day. It will be periodic blasting.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like what they did on, in Boulder Canyon. And I'm not 100% sure if they are going to know the exact dates that it's going to happen and put out, some sort of notice, certainly on the website. They won't do a press release every time they're blasting.
Sure. Thank you.
But yeah.
Anyone else? Great. Thanks, Therese, for your report. And if we are all set, I guess we're adjourned.